What's up, guys? Brett Okamoto from ESPN, and it's that time of the week. It is UFC best bets for UFC Fight Night. Mackenzie Dern versus Marina Rodriguez, a big fight in the female strawweight division in the UFC. It's happening at the Apex here in Las Vegas. And to break it all down, underdogs, parlays, props, who knows where this guy's going with his money? It is Ian Parker, my colleague over at ESPN, our betting analyst, our betting expert, our betting savant. Ian, how are you? And what are your thoughts overall on the card this weekend?
I'm great, man. I'm happy to be back. Partner up with you as always. Going to be a lot of fun. Make some money. Make some great picks along the way. This is going to be a tricky card. We see a lot of favorites here, but to your point, we're going to try to really break it down so we can give people something to play with.
Yeah, I mean, you can only work with what you got, and you're right. There are some big favorites on this card, but I'm sure that you will weed out the ones that are not going to hit and tell us the ones that are going to hit. Let's take a look at the undercard first, the early prelims. As I mentioned, we're going to do a deep dive into these cards every single week. Lot to look at here. Again, some heavyweight fights. It's a strawweight fight from the females. Sometimes you get those cards where it's kind of like a focus on a weight class. This is not one of those. I mean, we're getting a little bit of every weight class here. Let's go ahead and start with the first prelim, the curtain jerker, if you will. Ian, Charlie Ontiveros taking on Steve Garcia. Ontiveros, 30 years old, fighting out of Houston, taking on Steve Garcia, who some people might remember from the Contender Series. It is a lightweight fight, 3 rounds, of course. What are you thinking about this matchup?
With Ontiveros, we saw him against Kevin Holland. That ended very quickly and very awkwardly with the neck injury. So we haven't really got to see him in action. But if you go and look at his record, look at other fights, he either wins by TKO or loses by TKO. And he's fighting a very talented striker in Steven Garcia. We saw Garcia in his last fight take a short notice against Luis Pena. And, he was, I guess, dominated on the ground, but didn't get submitted. And when the fight was standing, he was holding his own in the striking department. I like Garcia here. I just think he's the better striker. I think he's better overall, well-rounded. He's more composed. Now, the line's a little high to take it straight. We're already getting into the prop department here. So I'm going to go Steven Garcia by TKO, KO, or sub, essentially winning inside the distance. I believe it's at minus 135, which is a very doable. The juice is not too high. We're going to go with Garcia there.
Yeah, and Garcia looking for his first win in the UFC, as you mentioned, 0-1 in the UFC, but that fight was on short notice. Obviously, high expectations for him coming off the Contender Series and now favored here in his second fight. Let's move on to the strawweight fight of the prelims. It is Lupita Godinez taking on Silvana Gomez-Juarez, and this is some interesting circumstances around this fight. Gomez-Juarez was here in Vegas, getting ready to fight on the Contender Series, though, and now she has a UFC contract because Godinez lost her opponent in Sam Hughes. So not necessarily a short notice fight for these two, but a last second change in opponent. What do you make of the circumstances, and how does that affect your handicapping?
Even though it's not technically short notice, for me, it's still a short notice in regards to where she's fighting. I think there's a big difference in the competition level she would get in the Contender Series to now fighting in the show, at the UFC, and fighting someone in Godinez, who is a very tough fighter. We saw in her last outing against the seasoned veteran and Jessica Penne, she lost by split decision. I actually thought she won that fight. I don't know how you could actually shot put another human being multiple rounds and then, whatever it is, but then get caught with the arm bar, all that stuff. I mean, look, Jessica Penne is very tough on the ground off her back. This is not where Suarez is at her best. I think Godinez is a very solid prospect. I think this is a better matchup for her to get started in the UFC and really build herself up. We like Godinez. We're going to throw her in our parlay later on, so we'll get back to her later.
Yeah. And just to close the loop on this one, Gomez-Juarez, she has fought UFC competition in her career, never been in the UFC herself, but she is the veteran here. She's 36 years old, and like you mentioned, Godinez is more of the prospect, 28. Some high hopes for her coming into this fight that was supposed to be against Sam Hughes. Now it's against Gomez-Juarez. So we'll move on from there to the featherweight fight between Charles Rosa, fighting out of American Top Team, of course, taking on Damon Jackson, another veteran. He's with Fortis MMA down there in Dallas. These two, we know them very well. I mean, we were just talking about Godinez, a new face and a prospect. These two, we've seen these two go at it. How do you see this matchup going?
At first I was looking at Rosa as an underdog, but he is the most confusing fighter, in my opinion, to bet on or against, because the fights he's supposed to win, he loses, and the ones he's supposed to lose, he wins. And then even in his last fight against Justin James, he was dominating, but then he almost lost. Kind of a questionable fight IQ at the end of that fight. Now, in this type of situation, he's fighting a guy I think whose stand-up is more aggressive than Damon Jackson. I think Damon Jackson's got a really strong guillotine. And when he's on top with his grappling, he's dominant. Rosa is excellent off his back defensively. We've seen him be dominated, and he just doesn't get submitted in that way. So for me, I think the striking is somewhat even, with Jackson just being a little bit more the aggressor. I see Jackson being on top and grinding it out for 3 rounds. And I see Rosa just defending off his back and not being able to submit from there. So instead of taking Jackson straight, which I don't mind that, I kind of like the prop at by decision at plus 160 and more. I really think that if he gets this done, it's going to be by decision.
Well, it's interesting when you say that you don't know what to make of Rosa, because in a way, we know exactly what to make of Rosa. As I was looking at this guy's career, do you realize this? You know what I'm about to say, Ian?
Go for it.
10 fights in the UFC. He has alternated wins and losses in all.
That's
10.
why I was up and down and up and down.
Yep. What are the chances of that? Being in the UFC for years, 10 fights, and he's never won 2 or lost 2 in a row. So, and of course that begs the question, what did he do in his last fight? He is coming off of a loss. So you're saying that he's going to buck the trend in a negative way and lose 2 in a row. For the first time in his UFC career,
we're not playing that trend here. It's too tricky with him. It's too tricky.
Well, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this next one, because this is a heavyweight fight. Alexander Romanov versus Jared Vanderaa. Romanov is an interesting one to me because, he's early on in his UFC career. Odds makers are clearly high on him. They're high on him in this fight. They were high on him in his last fight. He's fighting out of Moldova, undefeated, 14-0. Is this guy for real? Should he be this big of a favorite against Vanderaa? How are you seeing these two play out, and how does the big line again impact the way you're looking to bet this fight?
Well, look, with Vanderaa, he actually won as a big underdog in his last fight, and a lot of people took a shot at him because of his style. Now, I do think Romanov is the real deal, and I like the way they're bringing him up. They're not rushing him, even though there's not a ton of depth in this division. In his last fight, he finally faced adversity against another fighter, and we've seen somewhat of cardio issues, but then we saw him improve in the fight after. I think this is a very dangerous guy who knows exactly who he is. He keeps getting better each fight. And even when he wins his fights, he addresses what he did wrong and he recognizes it. So I think this is a scary heavyweight prospect. I think this is someone to keep an eye out for. The line was originally minus 400. I think it's up to minus 625. I really didn't want to do a prop here because I think Vanderaa is tough and could possibly survive this. So we will take Romanov. Again, we'll throw him in a parlay later on to try to get some sort of value out of him. But I believe he's the real deal. And again, I really like the way he's not being rushed up the ladder.
Ian, when you're taking these big favorites and you're sort of parlaying them together to minimize kind of like the hurt on the value that you see it, are there some though where you're just like, it opened at 400, now it's up to 600. I like it. I think he's going to win. By putting them on a parlay, I can minimize I can kind of try to recoup some of that value. But does it ever get to a point where you're just like, man, a change of 200, that's too significant for me? I mean, if it's open at 400, that's going up by how much percent? That's significant. So how do you kind of make those decisions when you're putting together those parlays?
No, it's a great question. The way I do it is I try to go by the money value and see how much it adds to the potential win. And for someone, I think if it gets any higher than that, you might get an extra 50 to 60 bucks, or then it's not worth the risk. I think right there, though, we're still getting a strong number, and we'll see those numbers later on with the parlay. There is a line to be drawn somewhere. When you see these minus 800s, these minus 700s, we talked about Valentina Shevchenko a couple of weeks ago. That's why we went prop. You would have won maybe an extra $5. And who knows? It's MMA. Anything could happen. So that's why we do draw the line at some point.
Okay. Moving on to a bantamweight fight between Chris Gutierrez and Felipe Corrales. Gutierrez intrigues me, man. He's 30 years old, fights out of Factory X. I like I wouldn't say that 30 is necessarily young in this sport, but Factory X, I like the kind of youngish talent, the prospects that they have over there. Yusuf Zalal, Jonathan Martinez, Brandon Royval, Devontae Smith. I mean, it just seems like a good training environment. It seems like guys who have, even when they lose, they're just, the skills are there. I like this group from Factory X, and Chris Gutierrez, you could maybe say is the best one of them. He's 4-0-1 in his last 5. Again, taking on Felipe Colares. What do you see in this 135-pound matchup?
I think for Gutierrez, I'm a fan also here. I think he's a true prospect. And I really think he's just got to watch out. Look, you got a guy in Colares who is excellent on the ground off his back. He also is excellent in judo. So for Gutierrez, I'm sure he's training with guys similar to that. Someone like Brandon Royval is probably a good training partner to have on the ground, who's very unpredictable, excellent off his back with submissions. For Gutierrez, though, he is going to have the striking advantage big time here. I think with his reach, those kicks are devastating. If he's able to land calf kicks early, it's going to take away any opportunity for power in judo throws or even on the ground. I do like Gutierrez here. Again, this is someone we'll probably toss to a parlay, only because he's still green in his career in the UFC. Like you said, young. So it's hard to lay that type of juice at minus 230 or more straight up. But we are going to go with Gutierrez later on.
Okay, let's move on to this main card that, of course, again, is headlined by Marina Rodriguez versus Mackenzie Dern. Excited to talk to you about that fight, but we'll start, with the first fight on the main card. It's a 185-pound fight. Interesting matchup to me. It was a fight that was supposed to take place earlier this year, fell off because Deron Winn injured his ribs. The UFC liked this matchup so much that rather than book Phil Hawes, who has his own history in terms of expectations and his prospect, will this guy become something? Will he not? They decided to just keep him on ice and hold him for this Deron Winn matchup. Why do you think that is, Ian? Why do you think the UFC likes this matchup? And then how do you see it breaking down?
For me, this is going to be, I guess they really want to see if Deron Winn either belongs in the UFC or belongs at middleweight. Okay, we really, we've talked about his size in this division. He talks about, I've been wrestling and fighting guys this size and had success my whole life, but we see in the UFC, the reach has really been bothering him. The power from these bigger 185ers has been bothering him. And he's running into I really think, a monster in Phil Hawes in this division. So for me, the matchup stayed intact to either keep building up Hawes and to really show Deron Winn, like, hey, either if you want to stay in this weight class, you're going to have to really fight for your life, or, hey, we like you. You got to go to 170, because I think Hawes here is the better striker. I think between the two of them, their cardio has not been great. We saw Hawes get better with that in his last couple of fights, but with Deron Winn, he gets hit a lot, and we've seen him get dropped. On the ground, they both have good wrestling. I think Hawes is physically the stronger, more gifted athlete of the two. So I like Phil Hawes here. I think he's a tremendous prospect. As long as cardio doesn't get the best of him, he's a guy to keep an eye out for sure.
Well, you've been talking about this parlay throughout our breakdowns of these fights, and to my understanding, this is where the parlay ends. You have some plays, obviously, for the rest of the main card, but your parlay that you're going to throw out this weekend is only up to this point in the card. So why don't you go ahead and reveal that parlay for us now that you've been talking about so much?
Yeah, so we're going to go with Godinez, Romanov, Gutierrez, and we're going to finish it off with Hawes, and I believe that gets us to plus 187. So you're almost getting 2-1 on some big favorites on the card. And honestly, if you don't go that way, I don't know how else you maximize value on guys like that.
Okay, so that we get the parlay out of the way early. I don't know if that's going to be a trend or not, but hopefully you got some more bets, and I know you do have some more bets for us the rest of this main card. Another fight I'm interested to talk about, man, Maria Agapova taking on Sabina Mazo. I got to admit, I'm kind of an Agapova fan, and I think it's just because, she came out on the Contender Series, and you heard Dana White say it, just kind of the way she stands, how lengthy she is. She kind of reminded him of a young Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and then she came out in her UFC debut and she fights wild, man. I mean, she fights wild, she fights reckless. She beat up on Hannah Cifers, but then she crashed back to earth and lost against Shayna Dobson in her second fight. And, she was talking about how maybe some personal issues leading up to that fight maybe impacted her performance. I don't know what to make of her. I think that's why I like her. I think that's why I'm intrigued with her, that, hey, sometimes her recklessness can overwhelm people. But then we saw it get her in trouble, and then she gassed out against Shayna Dobson in a fight that she was a big favorite in. So she's fighting Sabina Mazo here, who is also 24, fighting out of California, originally from Colombia. Super interested to hear what you think of not only this matchup, but also kind of like my apprehension and my take on Maria Agapova. I'm super interested, but I don't know if I would want to bet her.
You know what? I'm kind of, and I'm not just saying this because we're partners here in crime here. I kind of like Agapova here in this situation too. It's hard when someone goes from minus 800, loses to someone like Dobson where she was winning. And I think she just got tired from the amount of output and volume. She got ahead of herself, the adrenaline of being in the cage. And listen, she's either going to learn or it's going to happen again against someone in Sabina Mazo. Mazo is a very talented striker, decent on the ground enough, but she's so hesitant. If she doesn't dictate the pace, look what happened in her last fight against Alexis Davis. Davis is someone who's not known for her striking, and she beat up on Mazo here. I think Agapova could do the same thing. I don't see Mazo putting Agapova on her back, even if she does. Not a lot of activity there. So I think this is the underdog to possibly look out for. I think we got to hope that Agapova is a true prospect, that she learned from that mistake, because outside of the cardio, I think, and being a little bit more poised and composed and not just fighting with reckless abandon, like you called it, I think at plus 167, that's our dog to play here.
I'll ask you a follow-up there because, you know, you mentioned that Alexis Davis fight. And of course, it's always, you always got to take whatever you can get from the information that's provided to you. So how do you weigh, though, the fact that that fight was at 135, Matzo obviously back at 125 here, and that's something that we're going to continue to see, right? I mean, it's less so now that you know, the pandemic is not what it was in 2020, and the you know, the short notice fights hopefully are going to be less than they were in 2020, and the training situations are a little bit better. But we're still seeing these fights that are kind of at a catch weight, or if it's a late short notice fight and it is fought at a weight class above. How much do you want to take from that Alexis Davis fight, knowing that Matzo was fighting up a weight class there?
For me, it goes by the matchup because Davis is not a big 135er. It wasn't like size did anything there. It was more of a striking battle that we didn't expect. And when the fight went to the ground, you know, Alexis Davis is very good on top, and Mazzo is also big for 125. So I didn't really think, to your point, yes, in some situations, you could see the absolute difference in weight class with people going up or dropping down because of the size difference between weighing in and then fighting 24 hours later. As you saw with Jalen Turner, the guy weighed 180, I think, the next day, whatever it was. The size does make a difference sometimes here. I don't think it mattered in that Davis fight, so I'm really not taking a whole lot into it. For me, I think Agapova, though, you know, at 125 here against Mazzo, it's an exciting fight, two solid prospects. We're going to see who bounces back from that loss. And I think Agapova's got the skills. If cardio holds up, we'll see.
All right. Moving on to a flyweight fight between Tim Elliott and Mateos Nicolau. Tim Elliott, guy's had a fun career. Not too long ago, it was looking like it was not going in the right direction, man. I mean, he had lost 3 in a row, but now you kind of look back in hindsight, and that was to Figueiredo, that was to Askar Askarov, that was to Brandon Royval. Those are all 3 very, as we know, very, very talented world-class flyweights. Now he's taking the guy Mateus Nicolau, who has shown definitely some intrigue at 125. But I wouldn't say that, at least right now, knowing what we know, would not put him on the same level as those 3. Tim Elliott now back on a 2-fight win streak. He's 34. Nicolau is 28. You like the veteran here, or you like the guy who's coming up, at 28-year-old Nicolau?
I like Nicolau here. You know, you talk about Tim Elliott. He is a seasoned veteran. He's fought top level competition, but you look at his last 2 fights that he won. I think he's fought guys kind of in the same where they are in their career compared to Nicolau, except Nicolau has beaten higher competition. You know, when he fought Manel Cape, that was a very tough test early on in his career in the UFC. And I think his style just kind of makes sense against Tim Elliott, which is why I'm going to go with him here. This is, you know, Tim Elliott is known for being the wild man. When he's on top, though, his control is excellent. I don't think he gets Nicolau on his back, which is where I think he would need to. I actually think that Elliott is almost sometimes his biggest Achilles heel. He's too confident off his back. He's too confident that he's able to get out of these compromising positions. But when you go against a grappler who's physically very strong and knows position over submission like Nicolau, it happened with Brandon Royval. That's why Tim Elliott got caught. This is why I think the numbers and the odds are the way they are. I also think that Nicolau is the more technical striker. I think he carries more power. So we're going to go with Nicolau here.
Okay. Moving to that co-main event, a 170-pound fight between Randy Brown and Jared Gooden. Almost kind of like what I was saying with Tim Elliott. Randy Brown has had a good career in the UFC. He has struggled to really kind of break through in the sense of getting in the top 10 or getting some of these bigger fights. And it's because he has come up short on some of his bigger ones, you know, but you can almost forgive him for it. Those losses have come to guys like Vicente Luque, Nico Price, Bilal Muhammad. Those are tough welterweights. I mean, those are established welterweights. Jared Gooden, again, no disrespect to him, but I don't see him on that level of the names that I just mentioned. But Jared Gooden, 27, fighting out of Atlanta, 1-2 in the UFC. You know that he could be fighting potentially with his back against the wall. You like Randy Brown here as the favorite, or you see some value on Jared Gooden?
No, I like Randy Brown here. Look, Gooden showed us in his last fight, he won by knockout against someone that was kind of in the same playing field as him. But when he fought someone against Alan Jaban, he was, you know, he just got outclassed every which way. And now he's taking this fight on short notice. You know, sometimes the confidence wanted to be super active to kind of build off that win. Blessing and a curse. Not everyone is Cowboy Cerrone who could take fights on short notice and win all the time. I think sometimes patience and really getting the right matchup will help. To your point, I think if he loses this fight, granted it's short notice, it's still not the best look. And I think for Randy Brown, I think he's better everywhere here. I think he wins this one by decision. Gooden's a very tough guy to put away, as we've seen. So as long as Brown doesn't get caught some weird way like he did against Nico Price, I think he's the better striker, grappler. Again, we know Gooden has cardio. He could take damage. I just think that Randy Brown edges out a decision in this one.
All righty, and we've talked about the prelims. We've talked about the main card. Talked about the co-main event. Let's get to this main event, which again, I think is an important one, man. And I want to give Marina Rodriguez her due. I think that she is very, very talented. She is, it seems like she's learned from her losses. But Mackenzie Dern, man, I mean, it seems like she is turning into the fighter that we thought she could be when she made the transition from the grappling world. And you look at what she's accomplished as a submission grappler, and now in the UFC, that wild card that she has in her pocket, but she's not afraid to strike as well. She throws hard. I think she has a winning mentality, and then she always has that skill of, hey, if this fight hits the ground, you're in big trouble against Mackenzie Dern. And even this week, when talking about the dominant champ Valentina Shevchenko, Mackenzie Dern is saying, hey, maybe it's going to take a very, very talented, dangerous submission grappler to end up dethroning this queen at 125 pounds. I don't know if I want to go that far and say that I'm giving Mackenzie Dern a shot to beat Valentina Shevchenko. We might be getting ahead of ourselves, but she brings up an interesting point. That skill set that she has makes her so dangerous at all times and makes her intriguing to watch. She is the favorite this weekend against Marina Rodriguez, who again has won 2 in a row, has the height advantage, has the reach advantage. I got to imagine that Mackenzie Dern may be going to be the public side, just because, she seems to be like everything's coming together and we're talking about her. Do you like Mackenzie Dern, or are you going with the underdog here in Marina Rodriguez?
I've been going back and forth a lot on this fight for all the obvious reasons that you just said. We talk about, man, we talk about someone in Marina who has striking, is probably top 3 in the division. And then we saw the power against Amanda Hebos. We saw the cardio against Michelle Waterson. What impressed me against Amanda Hebos was that she got up and then she finished the fight. And I think that also was a little bit of Amanda Hebos getting a little too confident, having so much success early in her career with her hands, thinking she could box someone like this. For me, I'm going to lean towards Mackenzie Dern because I think her ground game is just so elite that I don't think that Marina, once it's on her back, will be able to get up at all. Even if she's able to defend submissions, she's not getting up off the ground. We saw it against Carla Esparza, and I just think that right now for Mackenzie Dern, where's her striking at is going to be the question, right? She has never fought someone with this striking. She's got a great coach, Jason Perillo. And for Mackenzie Dern to get to the next level, to beat Marina here, the striking has to be just somewhat of a threat. Just somewhat. That overhand right has to connect one time to ring her bell, get her attention, so then she could shoot in. I'm going to go with Mackenzie Dern to win this one. I just think that there's very few people that we've seen in the sport in general with her level of jiu-jitsu, her grappling in general, her control. And I think her fight IQ is pretty solid. She knows where Marina's great at. I think it's a lot harder to stop someone in the grappling than it is with the striking, where you can keep the distance. There are ways to avoid damage. So I'm going to lean Mackenzie Dern here. I know a lot of people are going to probably take the power of Marina, and I understand it. But we've seen in fights when someone gets hit from a good striker, they can rely on their grappling. And I think Mackenzie Dern could do that.
I'll just make one note here, and you can tell me if you agree with me. I also think that the 5 rounds actually favors Mackenzie. If I was betting this fight, I would feel better about Mackenzie Dern having 2 extra rounds to potentially get it to the ground, because I just think that when it gets to the ground, her advantage there is so significant that I'm going to, obviously, I want this fight to hit the ground if I'm betting Mackenzie Dern. And so if you give her an extra 10 minutes to do it, I know that that's a double-edged sword, and we haven't seen Mackenzie Dern at 5 rounds. Marina Rodriguez, we have, this is her second now main event. So this could be proven very, very wrong. But I think Mackenzie has, she had some commitment issues in the past. Is she working hard? How's her work ethic? I think all of those are behind her now. She's making weight easily. I expect her cardio to be fine in the 4th and 5th rounds. And if you give me 10 extra minutes where she can get her on the ground, because once she gets her on the ground, I think she keeps her there and potentially finishes her there. So I like the fact it's 5 rounds for Mackenzie Dern. Are you with me on that, or do you see it differently?
No, I agree with you. The question is, how is Mackenzie Dern's cardio over 5 rounds? That's really the only question. If, to your point, it's there, then absolutely. Look, when we talk about, we've seen so many fighters steal rounds off a takedown and then position and control on top. She can rely on that at any point. Even though Marina does have good takedown defense, this is still Mackenzie Dern, world-class grappling we're talking about. So yes, if she needs an extra round to steal, if she needs that time to breathe and relax and get the fight to the ground, to your point, yes, that does help her very much. I just don't know where her cardio at is in a 5-round fight. Nobody does. I think she'll be well prepared. I think for all the reasons you said, there's no reason to think otherwise.
Okay, well, let's come to that part of the program. Well, I will give you my parlay.
I love
for
it.
the evening. Just a little bit of fun. Sprinkle some money out there. Let's see. I'm gonna do after listening to you break down this entire card, I'm gonna go with my girl Maria Agapova. I think that she's offered me some value, and again, I just think that her last fight didn't really kind of showcase what she was about. Hopefully, if she did learn from it, I think the potential is high on her, but Sabina Mato is also very good. So it's a little bit of a dangerous one, but I'm going to go Agapova. I'm going to go Mateos Nicolau on the main card as well. And I'm going to throw in Damon Jackson as well. Charles Rosa, fun fighter, but I think that streak does get broken. And Damon Jackson, he's well coached there at Fortis MMA. Our producer Jake is telling me, what does that pay for me, Jake? Plus 478. So if you got just a little bit of money you want to throw down on a plus 478 parlay, you may be real happy by the end of the night. But hopefully you're going to be happy regardless, because my guy Ian has given you a ton of different picks, a ton of different information on every single fight on the card. Ian, any final thoughts before we wrap up today's show?
Well, I know we got a big boxing fight coming up too. I know we got the Epic Fury Wilder 3. I got a couple of plays for that, if I may.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I actually like, I like Tyson Fury here to win. Now he is minus 300 and change. In boxing, that's not as crazy. And I'm going based off that last fight. He dominated. Forget the finish part of it. Just every single round, his footwork, just, we know what Wilder is. He relies on his power. He relies on that right hand. And if he doesn't land it, I don't really know where else he really threatens outside the power. So I'm going to go with over 7.5 rounds. Reason being is first fight went the distance. Second fight, it ended in the middle of the 7th. So if Wilder's team doesn't throw in the towel, he actually makes it into the 8th round. Whether he survives there or not, whole different story. Also, I think in Fury's last 5 fights, he only had that one TKO, and that was over Wilder. In his last fight against Wallen, he won by decision. And I like Fury to win by decision. I think it's plus 275. So if you're a big fan of Fury and you don't think he's going to win by knockout, those 2 plays, I believe, are the way to go.
Hey, I like that, man. I like that a lot, because also we don't know how Fury is going to necessarily approach this fight. Last time he came in with a super aggressive game plan, he basically made it known that he was going to do so. He changed camps, said, I'm not going to be sticking and moving. I'm going to get in the face of the power puncher. Some of us thought he was lying. He was not. He fought a very, very aggressive, active fight. And now they're asking him, are you going to fight him the same way? He said, wait and find out. So if he was fighting a super aggressive game plan in the second fight, and he dominated that fight, and he still couldn't get him out of there until the 7th round, and that was when the corner threw in the towel. I like the idea of the fight going past 7 rounds, so I'm with you on that one as well. That'll be a fun fight. I will actually be at that fight because it is here in Las Vegas, helping out with the boxing team, Mike Coppinger, all those guys ringside. But that is it for this week's UFC Best Bets. Enjoy all of the fights this weekend, and me and Ian will be right back here next week to talk about the next UFC Fight Night card at the Apex between Aspen Ladd and Norma Dumont. Until then, enjoy yourselves. Take care.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.